turning to Bill C-64, an act respecting pharmacare. As my colleague, the honourable member from Cumberland-Colchester, said in the House in April, the half-baked pharmacare plan being debated is truly about preserving this costly NDP Liberal coalition. In order to ensure that this coalition survives the next fixed election date so many members can lock in their pensions, the NDP has agreed to a pharmacare plan that covers only 2 categories of drugs while costing $1.5 billion and adding even more bureaucracy and gatekeepers to the already extremely bloated federal government. 97.2% of Canadians already qualify for some form of prescription drug coverage. It is important that we work to ensure the 1.1 million Canadians without coverage can access pharmacare, but this proposed system would leave them woefully underinsured and no better off. In the context of British Columbia, we already have coverage for contraceptives through our provincial government. So what we have in front of us today is not a universal pharmacare system as the NDP Liberal government has been campaigning on. It is a diabetes medication and contraceptive coverage system. Now, the member from Ottawa Centre just said in his speech that in 2028, diabetes alone will cost this medical system in Canada over $40 billion. Even the money put forward in this bill is only a drop in the bucket, and I wish the members of the NDP Liberal government would come clean about misleading Canadians about what they're doing, because all of us have had constituents come to our offices and say, when will the universal drug coverage kick in? I'm sorry to say, and it's not, it's a PR exercise by this government, and it's shameful. Canadians know how much a promise from this Prime Minister means, and it's not very much. This is the same Prime Minister who promised to balance the budget, or rather, that it would balance itself. This is the same Prime Minister who promised a $4.5 billion Canada mental health transfer that is yet to be delivered. This is the Prime Minister that promised British Columbians a universal daycare system at $10 a day. Good luck trying to find that in your lifetime. This is the same Prime Minister who promised that interest rates would stay low for a very, very long time, right before spending more money than any government in Canadian history and driving interest rates higher than they've been in decades. This is the same Prime Minister who has led to all of our GST payments on every purchase we make in Canada solely servicing the federal debt. Let that sink in. Every time you buy something, the taxes that you pay is only paying for the mistakes of Justin Trudeau. And I take that back.
Order, okay. The honourable member of Mission Masquerade Fraser Canada.
From the member, I will rescind that comment, Mr. Speaker, from the member from Papineau. The only goal of this bill, as we all know, Mr. Speaker, is to appease the NDP and avoid an election this government knows it will lose. Speaking of the NDP, they really ought to be ashamed of themselves for even agreeing to this plan. For decades, they've campaigned on a single-payer pharmacare system, and now that they finally have a sliver of power in this Parliament, they fold and accept a half-baked plan that will cost taxpayers billions while failing to provide coverage for the vast majority of medications Canadians rely on and that they promise to deliver. Shame on them. The leader of the NDP loves to say that he will win the next election and often starts phrases, "when I'm Prime Minister." If he truly believed what he was saying, why does he continue to prop up this failed government? His words, and why did he agree to this plan that fails to cover the vast majority of drugs and treatments? If you're going to do it, go all in. Take a risk. They're not willing to take a risk because it's just about covering their own butts and getting their pensions. This bill could have negative consequences.
I think we have a point of order from the honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Point of order? So I fully acknowledge that I said the leader's name, but I also know that we can't say things like saving butts and stuff. Yeah. That's my understanding. Just pointing that out. If he can take
so
that out.
just to sort of bring to the point, just to cut, just to be careful in the words that we're using. The honourable member for Mission Masquerade.
Sometimes I find those members' words very violent, but I will tone.
From the honourable member of Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, I am on to my dessert in question for the honourable member, but the point of order it seems quite prudish from the member.
Yeah.
I thought we were hearing earlier that we should be willing to more openly talk about certain things, and the member gets called out for saying the word but. Which I've never heard called as unparliamentary before. So I wonder if there's a new standard of prudishness that the NDP is trying to set in our...
I'll say, I don't want this to descend completely into a debate. The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
I mean, I think the member of parliament probably could have finished eating his taxpayer paid supper before coming in here. But I appreciate.
We're done. We're done. So that's descended completely into debate. No, I'm done on this. We're done this one. Just to get. I am standing up and I have the microphone, so I'm done on this point of order. Just a reminder to be judicious in the words that we're using. The honourable member, Mission Massacre, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, I take that comment and I take the comment from Winnipeg North to save their epidermis. There we go. This bill could have negative consequences for the 27 million Canadians who rely on private insurance. The nonprofit insurance sector has serious concerns about their future should Canada pursue a single-payer pharmacare system. Providers like Blue Cross could be wiped out entirely. As usual, this government tabled this bill without consulting a single stakeholder in the private and non-for-profit insurance industry. Killing private and non-for-profit insurance will be devastating for millions of Canadians. Across the country, private coverage is, on average, 51% more extensive than provincial public counterparts. When a new drug is approved by Health Canada, it takes an average of 226 days for private insurers, including Blue Cross, to approve its coverage. Public plans take an average of 732 days after Health Canada approval to add the drug to the list of covered treatments. Canadians with serious health conditions that require drugs and treatments that are only just going through the approvals process in Canada cannot afford to wait another 2+ years after Health Canada approves it. Today, more than 6 million Canadians are without a family doctor. A half-baked public pharmacare system will do nothing to change that and address their needs. Rather than spending another $1.5 billion setting up a system that doesn't cover the vast majority of medications, this government should be focusing on ways to support provinces in the recruitment of new doctors and nurses. That's why Conservatives have proposed a national Blue Seal program. This program would ensure that when a foreign-trained doctor or nurse arrives in Canada, they can quickly apply to have their credentials recognized and are given an answer as to whether they can practice in Canada within 60 days. Once approved, they would be able to work in any province that signs on to the federal plan. Right now, a doctor licensed in Ontario can't practice in Nova Scotia. A nurse licensed in BC can't practice in Manitoba. It's time to change this anachronistic system, Mr. Speaker. So in closing, this is not a universal pharmacare program, and it doesn't do anything to help the 1.1 million Canadians without access to pharmacare coverage, or the 6.5 million Canadians who can't even see a doctor. It is yet another expensive bloating of the federal government, adding more gatekeepers and more debt for Canadians to pay for while delivering next to nothing. I would add, in a riding like mine with a large Indigenous population, it will not be as accessible to Indigenous Canadians in rural areas either, because the amount of money is simply not enough even to do what they say they're going to do. So, after 9 years, the only drugs this government has been able to deliver are hard drugs like fentanyl, heroin, and meth that are flooding our streets and killing thousands every year. Conservatives will bring home the doctors and nurses our healthcare system so desperately need. And we'll axe the tax. We're going to build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime to lower the cost of living for all Canadians. That's what they want us focused on. I encourage all members to support the amended motion put forward by the member of Cumberland-Colchester, dispose of this bill, and start working to actually address the serious problems in healthcare across Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member from Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you, Speaker. I think I heard the member opposite say that the people in his riding do not want this pharmacare plan. They don't want their diabetes medication covered. They don't want pharmacare for reproductive health covered. It sounded to me like he's more concerned about the insurance companies and how well they're going to make out after this legislation goes through. Is that the case?
The Honourable Member of Mission Mascot Fraser Canyon.
Well, I believe Hansard will state that I didn't say that my constituents didn't want this legislation. But what my constituents do want is access to drugs in a timely way. And if we were to adopt universal a drug coverage in Canada, you know what it would do? It would lower the standard and accessibility of drugs that private insurance programs, including the program that all public servants are on right now, and it would lower their ability to get the drugs they need to keep them healthy. So I don't know why the member from Hamilton is against public servants having access to the very drugs that keep them healthy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions, commentaires? L'honorable député de Mirabel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the beginning of the evening, we've been talking about a bill on pharmacare, but it's touched on abortion, who's for, who's against. Really, we've covered just about everything and nothing. And I keep asking the same question, but I can't get an answer from the Conservatives on this. Does the Conservative Party, if one day it is in power, will it be in favor of Quebec opting out with full compensation from programs that are part of its jurisdiction? Yes or no? It's just a yes or no answer. Are they in favor? Yes or no?
The Mission Mascot Fraser Canyon.
I would like to thank my colleague from the Industry Committee for his question. If a Conservative government is elected, I would like for Quebec to maintain its jurisdictions in the very same way British Columbia is doing so. The Conservative government wants an open federalism system and to respect the provincial jurisdictions of Quebec and British Columbia.
Berkeley Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to my friend from Mission Matsqui, Fraser Canyon. One part of his speech I found particularly interesting, and that was this Blue Seal program. And the way I understand it, if he explained it correctly, is that it's a federal program in an area that is currently provincial jurisdiction, and doctors who obtain this Blue Seal will be able to practice their craft in any province that signs up for this federal program. It sounds an awful lot like other federal programs in areas of provincial jurisdiction, where you have a federal program with federal funding and provinces can sign up for it. I'm just wondering why the double standard when it comes to interfering in areas of provincial jurisdiction.
Mission Mascot Fraser Canyon.
I'd like to thank the member from Skeena-Balkley Valley for the question. I would disagree in respect to the Blue Seal program being a double standard. In Canada, immigration is a shared jurisdiction, and right now many of the doctors that come to Canada through our federal point system don't have access to the professions that allow them to enter Canada in the first place. The basis behind our plan is to make sure that when we accept someone into Canada through our immigration system, we're actually doing what we said we were going to do, and that's allow them to contribute in the profession of their choice to make Canada a stronger and more vibrant nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, the member from Mission began his speech by outlining how widely covered both medical care for diabetics as well as for the pill, et cetera, was already covered. So my question, or my comment is, they're already widely covered because it covers so many voters. Would this bill not be more aptly called Pharma Vote?
The honourable member for Mission Mascot Fraser Canyon.
Pharma Vote, I agree. This bill is I'd like to thank the member from the Ottawa Valley for her question. This bill is solely to ensure that the NDP and Liberal government can maintain their working relationship. Unfortunately, the NDP didn't stand up for what they believe in and what they promised their voters in the last general election, and that was universal pharmacare. They're selling themselves short with this legislation because they're not afraid to face the electorate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.